Bickley and Marotta mornings. Arizona sports. The local sports leader. Bickley Blast.
Kevin Durant's time in Phoenix is coming to an end. The news could drop at any moment. The moment of reckoning is fast approaching. So how are you feeling, Suns fans? Ready to turn the page? Excited about the renewal of your basketball team? Or terrified by what this trade and the future might yield? Some feel enthused because Orlando just traded 5 draft assets, including 4 first-round picks to Memphis for Desmond Bane. And if Bane can command that kind of haul, a KD trade has to be comparable, right? Some feel the draft haul Memphis just acquired marks a great chance to consider trading Devin Booker as well and rebuilding with a wealth of new assets. Alas, the Suns seem unwilling to even consider the option, which means they remain somewhat delusional about how far they've fallen. And some fear the front office doesn't have the experience to thread this needle, which might include a 3-team trade to allow KD to get where he wants to go and get the Suns what they need in return. My fear is something much bigger, namely whether the new general manager is the next Sam Presti or just another puppet executing the desires of the owner and Isaiah Thomas, his Hall of Fame buddy, because the latter might make the difference between a trade that is Kevin sent and one that is heaven sent. All right, today's Bickley Blast brought to you by my great friends at Chapman BMW. Make luxury attainable. Find them online at chapmanbmw.com.
There's been a lot of buzz, especially in social media, for people saying essentially Desmond Bane, who's a very good young player, but obviously he doesn't have the name or cachet of somebody like Kevin Durant. There have been a lot of responses like, well, if the Grizzlies were able to get that much for Bane, then man, what does that mean the price will be for KD? It also, you could argue, maybe helps the Durant trade market in the sense that if Bane was available, he's another good young wing three-point shooter scorer who's now off the market, which would mean there are fewer other possibilities outside of Durant for teams trying to make that type of move. So I think that anytime you get a big trade in the NBA, it can be the start of a flurry. And so the NBA draft is coming up. Maybe this was just the first domino to fall.
Yeah, that's Andre Snelling's on ESPN, and there seems to be some speculation. Is everything tied together? I think everybody, the basketball world, was waiting for the Kevin Durant trade or the announcement of an agreement between the Suns and one team or 2 teams or even 3 teams, and all of this was going to be the first thing to drop. Well, it's not. Blockbuster deal yesterday. 4 draft picks for Desmond Bane. And as it pertains to the Suns, it's an interesting discussion to have. What does that mean? Does that mean, you can read whatever headline you want. I was reading all kinds of headlines this morning, and there was one from yesterday in the last 24 hours. Suns not expecting a big haul for Kevin Durant. Well, if Desmond Bane, again,
now there are expectations.
Now
that's
there
the whole
should be
point.
expectations.
Yeah, that's kind of the thesis of the blast, that now the expectations have kind of been ramped up a little bit, which means it's another chance for it either means this might turn out better than a lot of people feared, or it means a lot of people are going to be disappointed when the trade is finally executed.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be a hard sell if the consensus is, wow, that's all they got for Kevin Durant. That's going to be a real tough pill to swallow for a lot of people.
I agree.
But realistically, if you look at it, the list of suitors has been narrowed because of this. Again, I know Brian Windhorst. I want to play this sound again from Brian Windhorst, who kind of compared it to another recent example. And he did this under the guise of, hey, there's 3 teams on the list for Kevin Durant now: Miami, San Antonio, Houston. There could be other teams, including one north of the border.
I want to bring up another team here because this is somewhat reminiscent of what happened in 2018 when Kawhi Leonard was a free agent. He had a list of teams he preferred to go to. He had 1 year left on his contract, and the Toronto Raptors were willing to roll the dice as a possible rental. And once again, you don't see Toronto on Durant's list, but the Raptors are one of the teams lurking out there who may be willing to do this without knowing that they can keep Durant on an extension and basically potentially be a rental. And I think there's a couple others, including the Los Angeles Clippers and potentially even the Minnesota Timberwolves. This is still wide open. Maybe Durant gets what he wants. Maybe he has to accept something else.
Yeah,
It's very interesting.
Look, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be suggested because there is the recent history. I think there's a lot of details that are left out there, and the details that I brought up earlier is the difference in age. Kawhi Leonard was 27 years old when he landed in Toronto for that year, and the San Antonio Spurs had every reason to do what was best for them and them alone in trading Kawhi Leonard to wherever. They didn't have to play ball with him because Kawhi Leonard didn't play ball with them.
Right.
Literally didn't play ball. That last year in San Antonio, he took his ball and went home.
It might actually benefit Kevin Durant and his image and his legacy if he were traded someplace he didn't want to go. As if, okay, we're not indulging you, and this is the city that's next on the KD tour. But I can't get past the idea that the Suns might get an offer from a team that might have Kevin Durant for one season that is better than the offer for the teams that Kevin Durant will sign long-term for. I'm having a hard time reconciling those two because that would tell me that the teams that are willing to extend him are really trying to take advantage of the Suns.
Or that they don't have the same assets. I mean, it could just happen to be that the team that he doesn't want to go to happens to have the assets you covet more.
I can imagine in the discussions between Rich Klim and Kevin Durant and his people in the Phoenix Suns, they are hammering home the point, look, he's going to be 37 years old. We can't afford this Kawhi Leonard pit stop for a year because that's 1 year less availability, especially if they're not willing to extend or I'm not willing to, my client's not willing to play there for more than a year. The Kawhi Leonard thing was remarkable in that it was the 1 year pit stop. They wanted to keep, and they won a championship.
And they won a freaking championship.
And he still bolted town. So Raptors fans are like, all right, that's cool. We got him for a year. We won a championship, and he moves on.
Right.
Now, another team that's off the radar, too, and Minnesota right now appears to be off the radar a little bit because of their salary cap situation being a second apron team. Brian Windhorst brought up the Clippers. That was a team that Gambo brought up last week in possibilities. Jake Fisher, who writes for the Steinline newsletter over the weekend, he brought it up. And they even have a clutch points graphic, a pretty convincing one too, of Kevin Durant in a Clippers uniform with James Harden and Kawhi Leonard. Regarding the Clippers, we've been consistently told LA has no desire to part with Ivica Zubac, as much as the Suns surely covet the consistently improving center. The Clippers, however, do hold 2 future first-round picks and some available swap rights to sweeten a potential Durant offer. That would almost certainly require the inclusion of Norman Powell, Bogdan Bogdanovic, and Derek Jones Jr. I'm going to throw up the stop sign there and say, no, they can't do that.
I'm going to throw up. Forget the stop sign.
I like Norman Powell a lot as a player, but again, the Suns have been fighting positional overlapping for the last 2 seasons. They can't go further down that road in any trade for Kevin Durant.
Totally agree with you. Totally. And that's another thing that I think is going to be a litmus test for the people making this trade. If they go for the star quality or if you end up with positional overlap again, then they've learned nothing. They've learned absolutely nothing. And so there's a lot of tentacles to this. Zubac would be a tremendous addition. They're not going to want to let him go. Steven Adams just signed an extension with the Rockets. He was at the very top of what looks like a very, very mediocre center free agent market. Yeah.
You just blip out there for a second?
Yeah,
I certainly did.
We blipped out for a second. That was very, very bizarre.
Everything went quiet.
That was weird because you kept talking. I saw your lips moving. I didn't hear anything. And then when your audio came back, you said exactly what you were going to say.
That's just Dan Bickley being a pro.
My brain just
stayed right on task.
Right on task.
He knew the message he was delivering, and he, by God, delivered it.
So this to me, again, I've got a lot of trepidation. I've got a lot of excitement. As I said last week, I just want everything about the last 2 years collected in a dustpan, whatever it is, dustbin, and thrown in the garbage. That's what I want. I want a new basketball team that plays hard and plays their tails off, and something that is dramatically different than what we've had for the past couple of years.
Thanks for watching Bickley and Marotta.
Click to see the latest Bickley Blast and hit the button in the middle to subscribe to Arizona Sports.